Well, hello again, Bitcoin 2025. Senator Lummis, hello to you.
Hello to you, and I want to say a special congratulations to Coinbase, the very first digital asset company to join the S&P 500 just 2 weeks ago.
Thank you.
And you joined at a very high number. Where are you in the rankings?
Somewhere in the 130, Senator, but who's counting? We're just honored and thrilled to be there. So thank you for that.
Well, it's a real credit to everyone at Coinbase to have yours be the first entrant into the S&P from this space. Thanks for all your hard work.
We appreciate it. And we also appreciate the opportunity to sit down with a sitting United States Senator, not just who has served the great state of Wyoming, but the entire nation in so many different ways. Most relevant to this audience, I think it's important to call out what a champion for Bitcoin Senator Cynthia Lummis has been for so many years.
Thank you. Thanks.
You know, before Washington, D.C., at least most of Washington, D.C., even knew how to spell BTC, let alone explain what it meant, Senator Lummis was already there. She was on the front lines from the very beginning. She learned the technology, she wrote the policy, and she's fought for the right of every American to control their own financial future in an important way. And I'm just going to exercise the moderator's privilege for a brief moment to brag on Senator Lummis. She's too modest to do it for herself, but it's important that we acknowledge all that she's done. 4 terms in the United States House, state treasurer in Wyoming, and now a sitting United States senator. She sponsored the Genius Act, which of course will create an entirely new regulatory framework for stablecoins, and the Bitcoin Act of 2025, which will establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve and direct the United States Treasury to buy up to 1 million Bitcoin. Yeah, that's worth some applause. You know, whether it's been stablecoins, self-custody, mining, tax clarity, Senator Lummis has just been a consistent, courageous voice for responsible innovation here in the United States and American leadership in a very troubled time. Senator, you've just been so central to every single major crypto and Bitcoin debate we've had in this country. And of course, the debate we're having right now in the Senate. We're just very lucky to have a chance to pick your brain a little bit and get your views on the state of the world for Bitcoin and beyond. So I want to get right to it. I mentioned the Genius Act. You have been a steady and strong voice for passing this new regulatory framework for stablecoins. It's going to mark the first time in the United States' history that we've had this type of framework, and it looks like we're getting close, or at least closer, to seeing it enacted. Where do things stand right now with Genius, and how do you see the act moving forward?
Well, we thought it would be easiest to start with stablecoins because it is fully 100% backed by fiat currency, and because there are still members of Congress who don't even know what digital assets are, that this seemed to be a great place to start, kind of a plain vanilla asset. It's just a means of payment, kind of like a digital traveler's check. And we all use credit cards, so we're already kind of used to using digital money. So we thought this would be the place to start. It has been extremely difficult. I had no idea how hard this was going to be. So we did get it out of the banking committee. I think the vote was 18-6. We gained some Democrats, so it was bipartisan.
Absolutely.
And then we began to encounter challenges from the minority party wanting more amendments in order to get it to the 60-vote threshold required to move the bill forward for a final vote. So we've been negotiating with the Democrats for weeks now. We think we have a final deal. So we think that we'll vote for cloture on Monday and start the amendment process just next week. And if we can get this passed, this will be the first piece of digital asset legislation to pass the U.S. Senate. It is the first bill in 8 years to come out of the banking committee.
Amazing.
And so we don't have the muscle memory to legislate anymore. That's our job. is to legislate, but we've lost the mental muscle memory to do it, but we're trying to slowly recreate it, get the Stablecoin Bill passed, and then move to market structure. And for companies like Coinbase, market structure matters a great deal because the Securities Exchange Commission has been very hostile to digital assets.
We've noticed, Senator. We've noticed.
So companies like yours have encountered enforcement actions instead of clear guidance about how to comply with SEC regulations. So you're in a guessing game, and you're playing, it's like bowling alone or playing tennis with nobody to hit the ball back. You can't get a response until they're suing you, and then encountering months and months and months of litigation. It's the worst possible way for our land of the free to treat its business people and its innovators.
I could not agree more. Senator, I want to ask you about the Banking Committee. Not everybody in this room or watching across the country or around the world has even a tiny fraction of the experience you've had in seeing how the Banking Committee operates. Could you just maybe give a little insight into the work of a committee within the broader Senate to give folks a deeper appreciation for how hard this legislation really can be?
The Banking Committee created, and this is to the credit of Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. He's the chairman of the Banking Committee. He created a digital assets subcommittee, and we worked the initial bill and then ran it through his committee. Lots of amendments. That's where sort of the hard work of crafting legislation happens. And so we had a 3.5-hour markup before we brought the bill out of committee. And then we'll go through similar processes when we get to the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, when we get to portions of market structure, the SEC portion. Interestingly, the commodities portion of the bill, which is where Bitcoin falls, Bitcoin's a commodity, that falls under the Agriculture Committee, because the Commodity Futures Trading Commission falls under the authority of the Ag Committee because they regulate agricultural products, which are also commodities. So at some point, we're going to have to combine those efforts. And then there's a taxation committee, the finance committee, that deals with the tax issues that we've encountered. So it's really hard in the Senate, especially, to piece a bill back together from its component parts.
I feel like we're all getting a real-time lesson in legislating in a way that is very, very special. So thank you for that, Senator. I want to return to something you brought up just a few moments ago, which is market structure. Love to hear your views on that legislation, and specifically, why is it so important that we pass a market structure bill fast on the heels of a stablecoins bill? Isn't stablecoins enough?
You know, the market structure bill is probably more important to a lot of the people at this conference than the stablecoin bill, because there are a lot of businesses, yours among them, that do business for people who either buy and hold, so they want a custodial service, or there's companies that lend Bitcoin. There is a futures market for Bitcoin. There are so many ways in which Bitcoin can interface with fiat currency, with the US dollar, that it's a much more important component of what's happening here at this convention and what's happening around the country with the creation of applications for engaging the Lightning Network in small purchases, for example. We want to make sure that there's a de minimis amount. So if you are buying something with Bitcoin, you are exempt from IRS reporting if it's under $600. Things like that are important to making Bitcoin very, very useful and utilitarian within the U.S. economy.
super important, and super important that we pass this legislation as quickly as possible once we're through the stablecoin.
Well, Paul, I know that on a subsequent panel, Brian Stiles and
Yes.
some of the other House members are going to be speaking about this as well, because we've been working closely with them, with the House, on this legislation. The advantage the House has with regard to market structure is the House of Representatives passed a market structure bill in the last Congress. It was called FIT 21. The Senate has never passed a market structure bill.
It has not.
And so there again, developing the muscle memory to have familiarity with a subject that is sort of a case of first impression is important. So I'm going to be very hopeful that we can work with the House, even behind the scenes before they bring the bill out, to see if they're able to pass something on market structure that could be also subsequently adopted by the U.S. Senate.
Well, it's been said, hope is a dangerous thing. I actually think in legislating, hope is an essential thing. You have to be optimistic, don't you?
Absolutely. It is a exercise of running against a wall and smacking into it and doing it day and day again with a smile on your face. It really is very frustrating, very exhausting, and you have to keep your creativity, your sense of humor, and your patience about you.
No question about that. Let me switch topics yet again to everyone's favorite topic, taxes. You have called for a de minimis tax exemption when it comes to Bitcoin transactions. Mm-hmm. I'd love to just understand a bit more of your yes, let's applaud sensible tax policy in this country. Explain to folks why you feel a de minimis tax exemption is just so important to supporting this technology.
As the Lightning Network develops and companies like Strike that have been leaders in that space create an opportunity for transactions to occur on a daily basis in Bitcoin, everything from buying a cup of coffee to a dinner somewhere. It will be helpful that certain transactions of that size, below $600 per transaction, not be subject to taxation. So that's part of what my office has submitted to the Finance Committee that's chaired by the senior senator from Idaho. And he is pretty positive, pretty welcoming of the proposals that we've submitted. The other thing we've submitted, Paul, that I think is worthy of note is that currently there's this terrible setup where if you're mining Bitcoin, you're taxed.
You are.
And then when you sell the Bitcoin, you're taxed again. There's double taxation if you're mining. And that's not true of other commodities. When we're harvesting corn, we don't tax it then. We wait to tax it until it's sold. So that's a provision we want to straighten out and make sure that Bitcoin miners are taxed only once, and that is when the Bitcoin is sold.
Yeah. I think you've struck a chord, Senator, with at least this crowd and many others watching this conversation. You know, what I find so sensible about what you've proposed, Senator Lummis, is the idea that, when it comes to Bitcoin transactions, folks are simply looking for the same set of rules to be applied. No better treatment, no worse.
That is an absolute fact.
Yeah.
I don't see Bitcoiners asking for an unlevel playing field where they're overly advantaged. You just want to be treated like everybody else.
It's a pretty basic expectation, and I think a basic call to fairness.
Yeah, and part of the problem in the last 4 years have been largely regulatory agencies that have been very hostile towards digital assets. So we're trying to change all that as fast as we can. It doesn't happen overnight. We don't even have a confirmed IRS director in place yet. So it's really hard to get these structural changes enacted by the rule makers at the IRS when there's no IRS commissioner yet in place, but I understand the Finance Committee is going to start those interviews next week.
You know, in your incredible work on Genius, one thing that has struck me is that you have really pursued legislating on stablecoins in a bipartisan way from the very beginning. And I wondered again, for the benefit of our audience, if you could share a bit of your experience working with Senator Gillibrand and attempting to forge a consensus across a political aisle that can sometimes seem so insurmountable these days.
Yeah, and I have not found that to be the case, particularly with Senator Gillibrand. She and I paired up early to work on these issues. She's been a great partner. Our staffs are almost interchangeable. If my staff is unavailable, I call her staff and vice versa. As the negotiations for the Stablecoin Bill have been going on, people on my staff have been the go-to negotiators to find the sweet spot, the compromises, and helping draft that as quickly as possible. I really do have one of the most highly respected, if not the most highly respected, staff on Capitol Hill when it comes to digital assets. And so their regard for finding good policy and not caring whether it was a Democrat idea or Republican idea has really, I think, established a level of trust among people who've been around for a while. Now, the problem is some of the new people that were just elected, they're just beginning their terms in January, haven't had that experience with me. And so here we are legislating. I'm the chairman of the Digital Asset Subcommittee, so I'm chairing these meetings. And I don't think some of them realize how long Senator Gillibrand and I have been at this, and how very bipartisan we've tried to keep it. So I'm finding that more challenging to get this pushback. And I suspect Senator Gillibrand's finding it challenging too.
I'm sure she is. I have to just applaud, the effort to work across the aisle, even as you and many of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle have very strong, deep, genuine disagreements on a whole range of other issues. You're finding common ground where you can, and I think that is something that serves the country very, very well. I also have to just point out, Senator, for the audience's benefit, your staff has done an amazing job. Chris Land, other members of your staff are true servants for the public, but I think their ability to forge working relationships with the staff of other offices in the Senate has been a really effective tool for the effort to get this bill passed.
And I think that is somewhat unusual, but the fact that we were not able to legislate during my first 4 years on the Banking Committee because the chairman would not let any legislation out of that committee, not a single piece in 4 years. And so it was all build up on our part, gaining knowledge, sharing drafts, getting feedback from people like the people in this room who could identify issues that we had not addressed or had not addressed correctly and help us make a better bill. So the silver lining between about all that frustration is that I think we do have a superior product. We have a superior base of knowledge. Chris Land and Connor Brown in my office are fantastic. They have solid working relationships across the aisle. Their attendance at negotiating meetings is mandatory, not optional. People trust them. And so that has been delightful. And as big a struggle as this has been, I still remain very hopeful and very positive that we're going to be able to move forward with stablecoins and then move into market structure. And then hopefully a Bitcoin strategic reserve.
Can we talk
later.
about the reserve for a moment?
Absolutely.
I know folks want to hear more about that.
Yes.
You haven't even talked about it and they're clapping. I love this. President Trump has been very clear in his vision that the United States adopt this reserve. Obviously, you have been a champion of this idea for some time. Yeah. Could you just talk a little bit about why it's so important in your mind for the United States to have this type of reserve in place and what it can mean for the country?
Well, we're $37 trillion in debt. So if we bought and held 1 million Bitcoin for 20 years, it would cut that debt in half. And we have underperforming assets on the books right now that can be converted to Bitcoin without borrowing additional money. It's just taking gold certificates that are valued at their 1970s value and bringing them up to current fair market value for gold, using them to buy Bitcoin. Buy and hold for 20 years, HODL, and we could eliminate the debt in half. And for those of you who were at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, you might recall RFK saying if we had a $4 million Bitcoin reserve, 4 million Bitcoin reserve, that it would eliminate the debt. So those are the kind of numbers we need to do to illustrate to our colleagues the significance of having an asset that's growing in value at the same time that we, the Congress, are debasing the value of our currency by spending more than we take in revenue, and the Federal Reserve printing dollars 24/7. You know, we had a really disappointing auction just recently, of bonds and treasuries. And that should send alarm bells to every single member of Congress, that if we don't do a better job of addressing our debt and do it this year, that the headwinds for the US dollar are nerve-wracking.
Well, treasury markets rarely lie, and I think it's important we take the message that they're communicating from that auction to heart. Senator, can I ask you a bit about your support for not just Bitcoin, the idea, but the ecosystem as a whole and protecting innovation here in the United States? And in particular, there's been a lot of conversation, even this morning in the hallways here at the conference, about Bitcoin mining and its future in the United States. Why is it important? Why does it matter that we preserve an important role for the United States in Bitcoin mining?
Bitcoin is such an important global strategic asset, and it is not only important in the economy, but in our global defense, because there's components to our defense. One is, having a lethal war-fighting machine that can overcome other armies and other military efforts. Another one is having an economic machine that can overcome other currencies. The Chinese want to dominate in both spaces. And so we're in a bit of an economic war at the same time that we're building up our abilities to defend ourselves and some of our allies. So even our military generals say that Bitcoin is an important deterrent to aggression from other countries, especially from China. And so we have to be a robust participant in a strong Bitcoin ecosystem, and that includes mining. And then there are ways that mining, oddly enough, is very advantageous to our energy infrastructure. For example, in Texas, because Texas has its own grid, electric grid, they can mine Bitcoin at night when energy consumption is low for other users, and then reverse it the next day. And that creates a stability within the Texas electric grid that makes it operate more efficiently. The same thing is being pursued in the Tennessee Valley Authority. So there are definitely ways that Bitcoin mining can help have a much more efficient delivery system, and we can continue to grow our ability to serve new energy markets. And of course, we all know that artificial intelligence in the race we're in there with China, we're only about 6 months ahead of China in some areas, less in other areas, and maybe a smidge behind in other areas. And the bottleneck is going to be having enough energy. And so it's very important that as we move from traditional uses of energy to data centers, to Bitcoin, and then to artificial intelligence data centers, that we have more energy, that our demand for energy is only going to grow. And part of what Bitcoin miners do is invent new ways to produce energy more efficiently, less expensively, and use it more economically. So this is a very important industry. Bitcoin is a very important industry to our economy, to our energy grids, to our intellectual capabilities, and especially as we move into a more robust artificial intelligence economy. It is the base technology. If you look back to 2009, when the Satoshi white paper was produced and the very first use of a blockchain was done, it sparked a whole new global effort to make intelligent uses of energy and do it in a way that produces economic value and economic freedom. Perhaps that's the most important word associated with Bitcoin, is freedom.
Well, Senator, I can't think of a more inspiring point to close on, but you've been such a tireless champion for the entire American and indeed global Bitcoin community. I want to give you an opportunity for one last word to that community. Anything you want to share, any words of encouragement, hope, inspiration, anything at all that we can do to help that you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
Well, thank you, Paul. And I just admire your work so much. You went from MIT to the Chicago Law to being a very significant developer of this industry throughout your entire career, and now doing so at Coinbase. And we've all been able to learn from you and take advantage of what you've been able to share with us, as those of us like me who don't have that background have tried to develop that background. So for starters, I want to thank you for everything you've done to help me learn more as a legislator so I can be more effective. And I want to thank the people in this room for that as well. It's amazing how many people in this room, how many people I've talked to today have helped inform my understanding of what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong and how we can tweak it and correct it and make it better. Because as President Trump has said, the United States has to lead. It has to lead in this area. We've always led. We are the financial markets capital. We have created so much of the technology that's in broad use around the world today. This is no time for us to fall behind. This is where we excel. But we can't let government constrain us. Imagine, as I think I said this morning, if the Wright brothers had faced all of these regulatory agencies to decide that they didn't have the chance to fly because somebody might get hurt or something might go wrong. And we're free people. And free people are just able to envision things that you can't think about if you don't have enough food or your government is looking over your shoulder. And so this is the place where this innovation will occur. Look at the Lightning Network. Look at all the applications that are going to come out of it. Then you look at artificial intelligence. You'll have somebody like Peter Thiel say, well, here was the internet in terms of its technology. Here's Bitcoin. Here's AI. I mean, we're moving into avenues that are just, we can't even conceive of today. And there are people in this room that can see where we're going. But we have to enable the people in this room to take us there. And if the government gets in the way, you'll find greener pastures. We know of companies that have left our shores because the government has not allowed them to pursue the freedom that's available when you are able to innovate and invent. And so I just want to leave you on a hopeful note. I'm very hopeful. And yes, you know, I wrestle with this and I beat my head against the wall in the US Senate, but you can see it. You can just see what this country can do. And I have great faith in the people in this room, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the people who will be undaunted by our government's reluctance to let us think freely and embrace the freedom that technology is going to add. It's going to add value to our lives. It's going to make things possible for people who are underbanked or unbanked or living in places with oppressive governments. You know, this is the place to do it. This has always been the beacon of freedom in the world. Thank you all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hope, faith, and freedom from the great state of Wyoming, Senator Cynthia Lummis. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.